something similar. And without further ado, I will share the chapter, which is the 15th chapter of this book, Monitoring Clusters and Workloads. We love this book so much, Scott and Mark. We can't let it go. But
we're good with that.
Thank you, guys. You're also joining to discuss it with us.
It's fun, and it's surprising that Mark and I still get along after all the time we have to spend together writing this and talking and of course real work related stuff that we deal with as well.
No, compared to the effort you put in writing it, it's nothing. But we're also enjoying it thoroughly, so it's definitely nothing. So it's actually quite a technical one. Technical is, and also there are really good suggestions, also best practices from across the industry. But it is mostly about how you monitor your clusters and workloads, basically. So we're going to go through the Prometheus project and the centralizing our logs using the LK stack, and how we can manage metrics in Kubernetes, and how we can deploy, firstly, the Prometheus stack, and how we can manage our logs in Kubernetes. I could actually pick up the scripts from chapter 15 and go over them, but could be like an overkill as well. So how would you like to do it? Scott, do you want to take it over and just read a little while maybe I prepare some of them?
Yeah, I would pawn this one over to Mark.
Yeah.
I talked a lot last time.
This was a really interesting chapter to write. This was the first edition where we included monitoring in the book. So this was pretty much a brand new chapter. In the previous editions, we had included some elk stack with Scott, help me out. Why am I blanking?
Mostly around Kiali. We had to deploy it. So I could do Falco.
Falco, yes, thank you. I'm not running on all cylinders today. Yeah. So we had a little bit of that in there, but as we were putting together the outline for the book, I'll credit Packet on this one. Was like, we really need a monitoring chapter. And so it started off with just Prometheus for monitoring. And then from there, it was like, well, we also need logging. I can't really call it an enterprise Kubernetes cluster if you don't have centralized logging. And so originally we were like, all right, well, we'll just, because we had taken Falco out of the book for the third edition, we're like, all right, well, we'll just take what we had done there and just kind of lift and shift. So that was the original idea. And then started going through it and realized that it was pretty specialized. One of the things from an industry standpoint that had really changed over the last few years was, Amazon had forked the Elk stack and, was building OpenSearch. And so you couldn't really do what we wanted to do with the Elastic version of it. So we made the shift and said, okay, we're just going to go with OpenSearch instead. So this chapter really has two kind of lives to it, two sides to it. The first one, we talk specifically about monitoring. We get into Prometheus.
Yeah.
And we didn't want it to be a replacement for the Prometheus online manuals. Those are pretty extensive. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this is Prometheus 2. They just came out with Prometheus 3 like a week ago, maybe. I don't even think it was that far. Yeah. Prometheus 3 just came out, and I only know this because I had a latest on Prometheus in one of my clusters that started breaking because there were some breaking changes between the two. Yeah, so Prometheus 3 just came out. So this is all Prometheus 2. And so what's fun about Prometheus and the tact we decided to take with this was less this is the step-by-step on how you deploy Prometheus, and more of a like, this is the general feel of how Prometheus comes together. This is what you have to think about. One of the things I really love about Prometheus is its pull-based approach to metrics. Allows you to do things in a way that previous metric systems didn't. Anybody who's had to deal with kind of some of the legacy systems out there,
all the agents stuff,
it's kind of painful. Whereas with Prometheus, because it's text based, it's not RESTful. And it's not JSON based the way that we're used to necessarily, but it is text based, which means that you can do a lot of really interesting things with it. You can do interesting things with security with it, which is always near and dear to my heart, and layer that on. So what we decided with this chapter with Prometheus is we wanted to give an overview of the three tools of the triumvirate, right? Prometheus Alert Manager, and Grafana.
Yeah. I can actually even take at least go over the deployment chapter if you guys want. So
sure.
Yeah, I haven't touched my personal laptop in a while, so I didn't want to go check out Kind because I have I don't use Docker, so it's like I need to upgrade everything every time. It takes a while. So I actually instead went on Killer Coda and spinned up the playground with the latest, actually the exam, one of the CK exams Kubernetes versions, and it doesn't have the scenarios that you have to finish. Although it says scenarios here, it takes you back into this menu of the exam scenarios. I quite like this Killer Coda and this empty playground to just start doing whatever I like. So obviously there's a time limit if you're not paying. I got the here is the GitHub project. Let me quickly.
And I will say that
Prometheus, then maybe that will cover the first side to it. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh no, I was just saying we haven't tested this in Killer Coda, so I
know. We might hit some sandbox issues. I understand, and if it happens, I'll just stop.
In this chapter 2, Mark, right, we should rely on the cluster already existing. So we'd have to do chapter 1 Docker and chapter 2 create the cluster.
Yeah, I mean for this particular chat, like the Prometheus one would probably be okay. What I don't know
let's give it a try. Maybe do some live coding. I just need to get rid of these because O'Reilly, when you copy all those, they stay. So we need to create a service account and a cluster role before everything happens, right?
Right. So what we start off with in the chapter, and what this part is just to talk about how metrics come out of Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So this is even before we get to Prometheus, and showing you all of the metrics information that you can get out of the
metrics endpoint, right?
Right.
Okay, let's give it a try.
So yeah, so that this is all of the metrics that Kubernetes will get you. And it is a ton of information,
Exactly.
right? And so that's where something like Prometheus comes in to be able to say, okay, well, once you have all that information, what do you do with it, right? Prometheus does have its own data store. It's a time series database, right? The interesting thing about it is once you have all the information in Prometheus, then you got to do something with it. And so that's where Alert Manager and Grafana come in, right? You use Alert Manager to say, okay, in these scenarios, we want to generate an alert. And then use Grafana to visualize the data.
To make sense of this massive amount of data. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. For now, I can access the metrics endpoint. Let me quickly go try this script. What was it? Deploy Prometheus chapter. Oh, okay. Sorry. There's also another folder here. Yeah. So this is going to deploy Prometheus, Grafana, and even Open Unison, as far as I remember, right?
So the initial script so the first part of it, we don't get into security yet. So it deploys Prometheus, Alert Manager, and Grafana.
Oh, it's the community version. Yeah, sorry.
Yep. And then we kind of walk through each of the UIs, what they're doing, how you customize it. I'll say that like the Alert Manager section took me like a month to write because I couldn't figure out why Alert Manager operator wasn't picking up my alerts. And it turned out because I was missing an annotation.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's
YAML engineering.
Yeah, the stack itself isn't the best documented stack out there, but it works really well, and it's really easy to upgrade now that everything's in CRs, so you don't have to worry about losing things as you upgrade versions. But then I also wanted to make it so that you could actually access it. Now that's a 172 IP address, so that's probably not.
Yeah, I won't be able to open this, but what about if I change it to node port? Maybe I can access this.
You could probably do a port forward with this. Yeah.
Actually,
I don't know how
there should be a traffic management. Yeah, I can actually hit custom ports. Let me. But first, I have a question from Alan. Curious if folks have a good reference to learn PromQL outside the Prometheus docs on this. You all think that is the best source?
ChatGPT.
Yes, that's actually a good answer for that. It is.
It's a little bit voodoo. It's a little bit dark magic and sorcery. Unfortunately, I've yet to find a really awesome PromQL reference guide that like makes sense.
Yeah. It's a big topic. There's a couple of Prometheus books out there, and then they that's why when we talked about a monitoring chapter of logging before, Mark and I were like, yeah. And I called that out actually in the Falco chapter about this is a whole skill by itself, right? That's why there's dedicated logging teams out there. You really, I know a lot of it and then I forget it because I don't write something for so long.
Yeah, I know. I also really, I keep learning it again and again and again.
You forget that syntax, and then I'll go to something like Splunk for a while and something different, and then I just forget it. Could be an age thing, I don't know, but I think it's just I don't use it enough.
We're probably similar ages, so I understand. I'm just butchering this. Sorry if it doesn't work out, but let's try this port here, 32297. I just changed the service type, nothing else. Oops. Let's try the other one, and then if it doesn't work, it's okay. So I can't use, I obviously it maps and port. Oh, I made a typo. It actually maps this port on a different port on the host. So obviously these are sandbox environments.
There we
Actually,
go.
yay.
Cool.
Yeah, and the great thing about Prometheus is if you have any legacy monitoring system experience, the acronym SNMP, security is not my problem. So yeah, it's both a protocol and an expression. But
oh, good suggestion from Tony as well. If you can't reach the UI, you can do literally like a query with PromQL using kubectl. Yeah, makes sense actually. Yeah.
Yeah. The nice thing about Prometheus, though, is because even though it has no built-in security, it's actually pretty easy to layer on additional security. So, like as an example, Open Unison. We get into this a little later in the chapter, where we say, all right, we want to add Open Unison's metrics into Prometheus, right? And that's something that kind of makes sense, right? Like that's the authentication system for your cluster. You want to know what's going on with it. But because it's the authentication system, you don't want to just expose the metrics to anybody. So Open Unison, we say, okay, well, we're going to authenticate you based on your Kubernetes service account. And so we protect the metrics endpoint, saying only the Kubernetes service account for Prometheus can access this endpoint. And then you tell Prometheus, hey, access this endpoint with your service account. And so that way you're adding that security in without making any changes to the Prometheus protocol, right? Because it's all built on web-based protocol. So that's one of the things I really like about the fact that it's HTTP based is it allows you to add additional layers of security in a way that is not like totally, it's not proprietary to that protocol. It's not like with a lot of database protocols or whatever, they have to explicitly support it. It can all be built in. So that's a nice thing about Prometheus.
Yeah, let's do some queries for guys who is not familiar with the Prometheus UI. This is how you can interact with the Prometheus server, but obviously this is going to give you, you need to understand a little bit of PromQL, but there is also some graphs here you can use. This is basically scraping Kubernetes metrics, right? Kubernetes API. And so here I am just aggregating by namespace and getting pod numbers. Is this pod numbers now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think so, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's actually. By the way, yeah, your exercises can work anywhere, as you can see now. It's possible.
Yeah, for this part it will.
Yeah, but by the way,
part it won't.
Yeah, if you would follow the kind pattern in the book, you would be able to access the Prometheus UI using this endpoint URL, and it will be like this would be your API server's IP address, but you would need to replace the dots with dashes. So for this API server IP address, you would need to write down this. It's quite straightforward, NIP.io format. So yeah. And yeah, there are actually, let's go a little over this. So there are alerts here as well. But we'll be also using the alert manager. I believe it's also in there. Let me quickly check. No. Oh yeah, here. Yeah, I actually probably should change this as well, so we would be able to get the alerts too from the UI. And maybe we can go to the before it gets to, you know, before we spend too much time on this, maybe we can go to the chapter where we try the Open Unison stuff. And
I don't think Open Unison will work in this.
No, I don't think so. But
way.
No, we could just go over the section and not try to do it here. I'm not entirely sure.
Let me see if I can do it.
Let's see. So also there is an alert manager in this in the Prometheus stack. Let me try this port. Yeah, there you are. So obviously you need to make sense of your metrics, right? So you need some alerts if something's going off, like if you are hitting a certain CPU threshold, or if there's something weird going on. So these are where you can empower your alerts. Also, silencing alerts is great too. Like, it's really easy to find it here. So Alert Manager is one of those, the standard ones you could use. So as you can see, there are some alerts we have here. I don't know if in the book we can find another one. So yeah, actually, we can go over a little bit with the metric form. Like this was really nice to remember. Like for each metric, the format is the metric name, and you have one annotation and the value, and the annotation and value. So this is quite straightforward if you want to, you know, familiarize yourself with Kubernetes metrics. I mean, Prometheus based metrics, let's say. Also, there are 4 types of metrics in Prometheus. There's counter, gauge, histogram, and summary. So for different purposes, you can use some different ones. So counters are like, it could be number of requests that, you know, increments or increases or decreases over time. And also a gauge could be used for things that are fluctuated, like for metrics that are fluctuated over time. Summary, you said generally speaking you want to use histograms. So histograms are, you know, a great way to have an understanding of your Kubernetes cluster and the whole environment. So there you talk about the common Kubernetes metrics. Do you want to? Oh yeah, this was a good number. I wonder if this changed after the book, but 212 individual metrics coming from the API server was a crazy number. And also you will see more from kubelet and etcd. Oh, a good question from Saif. Do you have a take on migrating to Victoria Metrics? I'm considering that.
I don't know what Victoria Metrics are, to be honest. Is that a new one? Is that a...
I've been hearing, but I also haven't investigated too much. Let's see. Maybe we can. So is this to replace Prometheus, Safe?
Actually, it's not replacing. It's like another tool. But the thing with our Prometheus instance, which we are facing for the last year, is the high cardinality of metrics. So we got lots of like OM kill a lot when with the high cardinality, and we have like high cardinality. We try to sample metric, but it keeps just crashing. And the problem with it crashing, then you are like blind during incident.
Yeah.
So sometimes during incident you are lost of metric, so we cannot know what happened exactly because we don't have metric. Thank God, at some point we have Datadog, but it's a paid solution.
Yeah.
So my team is considering really go to Victoria Metric because of this high cardinality issue. And it's open issue in Prometheus since like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
We are like following that issue, and it's
what's the difference that you see in Victoria Metrics?
We've seen lots of benchmarking that Victoria Metric like support easily high cardinality. We've been in a POC, tested with our like local setup, and it works fine. And there is no issue, and it runs very well. A part of that, they are both literally similar. Just it supports better when it's high cardinality, when you have high cardinality.
I've been hearing about it for a while now, but I also haven't had the chance to look into it as well. Thank you for raising this.
Yeah.
Maybe Carlos knows about it.
Yeah.
If one of his clients is doing the switch.
Yeah, because the switch is really also dangerous because you go from Prometheus, which is very well known, and have a community to some solution. It's not also.
Yeah, I understand. Is there a way that they both can work together for some certain cases? I don't know. Like this says it can be used as long-term storage for Prometheus, but as a drop-in replacement for Prometheus and Grafana.
Yeah.
Okay. Graphite and Grafana. Yeah.
It uses a little bit different timetable DB, so it's kind of better than PromQL, they said. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, please raise this when maybe.
I will ask Carlos next week.
Yeah, maybe Carlos has heard of some clients. And then, Shatop says, we use Thanos to address this issue. With Thanos, you can also cluster Prometheus. Oh yeah, what's your Prometheus setup like?
Our Prometheus setup?
Yeah.
What does it mean? Like, what do you use?
I don't know, like in Prometheus there is no multi-tenancy, but I don't know your use case as well, like that.
Yeah, it's just Prometheus with Grafana. We've used Thanos before, then we just drop it.
Okay. Okay.
I believe Thanos is the solution for high cardinality and high availability.
It's like a workaround then for that to use it with Prometheus.
No, but Prometheus is not the high availability solution. It's just a short time-based metric solution for a single tenant. If you want the high availability and lots of data, I believe Thanos is the to-go solution from the Prometheus project itself.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, is that Prometheus is not a good, like, I love Prometheus, but I also don't tend to keep data very long.
Yeah.
I tend to use ephemeral storage with it, and when I lose it, I lose it. I'm using it more for, point in time, active monitoring versus trending over the course of time. It's not a great solution for long-term storage.
Yes. He has the issue of this right ahead logging, WAL, which is really a thing there in Prometheus. I hope that Thanos. I will try Thanos out. I hope it solve it.
Yeah, go
Now,
for it. It seems like it's also offering it solves the storage solution problem as well, apparently.
Well, and it helps you with fragmentation, right? If you got multiple clusters all over the place.
Also, you need to be able to. Okay. Right, going back to the book, we're a little behind. So yeah, deploying the Prometheus stack. I haven't had the chance to show the Grafana, but it's there. You just need to change. I mean, you just need to access it for now. And let's see. Yeah, there is also the alerting chapter about how you can make sense of your metrics, but also in Alert Manager, you don't have security as well. Also, you can tag your alerts, so it actually it sits in a set of similar alerts. Also, as I touched before, you need to actually be able to focus on the right ones. So silencing, I don't know if you prefer it, but if you need it, if during an incident, maybe, right, could be important because you're already aware that this is like happening. So let me jump on the log management part. Right. Oh, sorry, securing access to your monitoring stack. Like, guys, do you want to say a few words about this one?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we were talking about before, security is not my problem.
Yeah.
When you launch the Prometheus stack, there's no security, right? Like Prometheus and Alert Manager have absolutely no concept of security at all. And Grafana does have a concept of security, but the Prom stack just does admin, and you're done with it, right? So, if you are going to use the Prometheus stack, you should add some security to it. And so in this part, we really do it from two ends. One is how do we add security into the stack to lock it down, and then also how do we monitor the security, right? How do you monitor your Open Unison? So we deploy Open Unison into this cluster, and then we show how you would add security to the three applications just by treating them as web applications. So Prometheus and if you scroll down a little into that graphic, you'll see that Prometheus and Alert Manager, we don't actually give the identity to Prometheus or Alert Manager of the logged in user because they don't care. They're not going to do anything with it.
Yeah.
But it makes it so that you can get access to it from the outside world, from outside your cluster. Grafana, we go ahead and inject the user as a header to go down to Grafana.
Yeah.
And so that way you now have access to the entire stack from the web, right? Whatever that means for you. One of the things that I personally am a big fan of is ending the tyranny of the keyboard. Like I like being able to access these tools from, my phone, tablet. Like I'm out and about. I'm not always sitting at my desk. And if something's wrong, I want to be able to check it quickly. So being able to access it through one of the dashboards very quickly, I find to be a big productivity boost and makes my life better. Mileage will vary. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of show off that idea of making this information available from inside of a web browser, like any other web application that you would have access to.
Exactly. Alan, do you want to?
Yeah, and I might have missed this, Mark, but with Open Unison, is this the authentication integration? What protocol or tech are you using there? Is it like just regular like SSO login?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're kind of in the tail end of the book. So in the front part of the book, where we get into more of the basics, not that it's basic, but the basics of Kubernetes, we do authentication chapter 6, which is where we introduce Open Unison. And so that's where we get into all the details. So the very short version is Open Unison. Think of it as a combination of Keycloak, OAuth 2 proxy, an LDAP virtual directory, and Backstage all in one container. Okay. And so in this instance, what we've said is we've deployed Open Unison with Kubernetes, right? So like you can see the dashboard and the token there. So that gives you access to your cluster. And then because it's an SSO system, we said, okay, let's add these other applications in for Grafana, Alert Manager, and Prometheus. And then later in the chapter, we do SSO for OpenSearch as well. And so depending on the application, we can do either the way you would with like a Keycloak or a DEX, where Open Unison is an identity provider. Or in this instance, because Grafana, Prometheus, and Alert Manager don't know anything about OpenID Connect. Well, Grafana does, but not in this particular instance. We use our own integrated reverse proxy to inject the identity information in. So you authenticate with Open Unison, and then Open Unison is also like your OAuth 2 proxy to control access into the resource.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Tony makes a really interesting. I did not know that fact, but it would not surprise me. You know, I don't think I have a Prometheus instance that lives longer than 30 days.
Oh, thank you, Sai, for the link. Let me.
Actually, better link. You can go there. That's totally true. But a better link is Unison. That's all of our docs right there.
Oh.
And like you get into chapter 6, and that's where we really start walking you through how to work with Open Unison. And full disclosure, I am the author of Open Unison. My company makes Open Unison. So I am not in any way neutral, in my opinion.
I can be on that. Right. So honestly, for everybody on the call, this is how I met Mark as a potential customer going way back. So it was about 6 years ago, roughly, Mark. And
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, it's a vendor geek relationship we started off. And of course, if anybody on the call here has vendors that they deal with a lot, you know, you got a common interest, you start talking and you become friends. So it was really myself who said, I think we should put this in the book. And I also wanted Mark to help co-author. So I do like the product for a lot of different reasons. So I got to come in there to say that, because like you were saying, Mark, it's going to look like that. But in my opinion, it also, the workflows are great. There's just a lot of stuff you can do. We've customized it quite a bit. But we like the idea of getting namespaces. We don't do that in the book because there's more complexity.
There we do.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, we do not in the authentication chapter though.
Not in the authentication chapter. Yeah.
I'm thinking we'll do that later on. But there's more setup to it, which has been streamlined quite a bit. So I just want to make sure I stepped in for a second, Mark.
No, it's much appreciated. Thank you, Scott. I gotta update some of these images on the on the documentation. But yeah,
a developer not updating docs? No.
Yeah, exactly.
He's taking notes now.
We're right now in the process of migrating all of our old XML-based documentation into the YAML-based And it's been a feat. ChatGPT has really made life so much easier making that migration. But yeah, it's a general SSO system. We've had a specialization in Kubernetes. But I mean, I will tell you, anybody who uses Keycloak or Dex and then switches to Open Unison, I am not ashamed to say that they never go back.
A huge key point for us, obviously, not that this chapter's for, that is support. Right? We needed to have some kind of support on a product, which is not common out there, right? You try to do Keycloak or Dex. Keycloak you can if you put it on, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, if you're running it on OpenShift, you can get some kind of support, but it's very specific. It has to be on OpenShift.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it has to be on OpenShift.
It was at one point, but not
yeah,
sure, no.
Keycloak was originally built for JBoss. It was JBoss's identity system, and you can't buy Keycloak from you can't go to Red Hat and say, give me the SKU, the SKU on Keycloak. They don't have it. You gotta buy something else to go with it. And I don't know anybody that does Dex support.
No, that was in question after all the CoreOS stuff, right? Yeah, I don't know what's happening with that one. It's still out there, as we know, but.
Yeah,
and I believe this is just like a middleware. It doesn't really solve the whole problem. You need some kind of front end in order to provide the authentication tokens.
Right, and so Open Unison does that for you. We have a plugin, so you could use the standard Kubo IDC plugin, but the nice thing about Open Unison, and I'm sorry that we're hijacking the Prometheus chapter on this.
I'm looking at the clock. Don't worry.
The nice thing about Open Unison is that we have zero configuration client management with our OU control plugin. So you just type OU control hostname, and it goes out. It authenticates you. Pops open the browser, it authenticates you, comes back, and you have a full kube control configuration. Or you can log into the portal, and the portal will generate a command line, which will give you a full kube control. So that one becomes really helpful in situations where if you have to use like a jump box or something, and you can't just pop open a browser, that becomes really useful. And then we also have specific plugins for Kubernetes. So like as an example, let's say you have to run multiple sessions on the same login. Kube control has a known bug in it where if you've got multiple kube control or client Go, it's not kube control, it's client Go SDK instances talking to the same kube control configuration file, and the tokens refresh themselves, they can overwrite themselves and break the refresh process. So we've got stuff that fixes that. But yeah, the security teams love it because it gets you to short-lived tokens out of the box. And the devs love it because they just don't really have to think about it. It just works.
I quite like this namespace as a service portal, actually.
That's actually where we started, was namespace. So our first...
Oh, really?
Yeah, so our first foray, so where I got started in Kubernetes was actually in the OpenShift world. And I started working with the OpenShift team and built a namespace as a service portal, project as a service service portal for them. Was our original thing back in 2000.
You still keep it?
Mm-hmm.
You still have it, right?
Oh, yeah. And then, in fact, at the first KubeCon in 2016, that was in Seattle, when the expo hall was still the lobby in the Sheraton. Tremolo had a booth there before, CNCF jacked up the prices to 6 figures for a booth. And we had a Raspberry Pi cluster with namespace as a service set up for a enterprise Kubernetes. And then we realized that people didn't really want that so much, or at least they weren't ready for it yet. So we scaled it down to say, okay, you could do the namespace as a service, or you could do just a simple login portal. So that way you don't have to worry about having that database.
Okay. Francisco's hand is up. It's been a while. Sorry, Francisco.
Yeah. Well, my question is kind of a little bit off topic about related to the book, but it's related with especially with this chapter. So at a certain point, I have already set up something similar what is described in the chapter. So I have my cluster with Prometheus. In this case, it's not Prometheus, it's Datadog. So basically, what I would like if you can share a kind of methodology or approach to set up the alerts and the threshold of the alerts to avoid false positive, because the time that I've been working with Prometheus and Alert Manager, we tend to silence the alerts. And then when we have a real issue, someone is asking why this alert is already silenced. So if you and Scott can share a little bit your experience about how you approach in order to set up the threshold, I would appreciate, because it's something that I have to do next week with a system. So any insight I will appreciate. Thanks.
I mean, I know for me, it's just trial and error. I find that every time I deploy it, it's just a little bit different. And so, really where the thresholds of how many failures before you actually set up an alert becomes super important. I don't know that I have like a hard, fast methodology other than that. I mean, I know from a higher level perspective, where I like to keep my alerts is I'm a big fan of synthetic transactions. And so I prefer to keep my active alerts at the synthetic transaction layer, because if your synthetic transaction is, putting your system through the paces, that's a good place to know where a failure is. Whereas, if there is, like if you run the stack that we deploy here for a couple of minutes, you'll start to see that there are threshold issues with, number of etcds or, whatever. You might not care about those so much because either they'll fix themselves in a minute or whatnot. But if you've got the alerts on the synthetic transactions and those break, then you know that there's something that really needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of do the same thing. I hate to be the no right answer for that. I don't know if anybody does. We've actually worked with Google quite a bit on those, saying, hey, can you just give us a list of what you do? And they were like, yeah, that's not the easiest question. Our SRE team, for an example, it's an iterative process. Like, for an example, I think what you were saying, we had our first couple clusters out there, and it was, 60,000 alerts. So what are you going to do? Turn them all off. Right? And then something breaks. And then you go, why did you get alerted? We've also written our own custom, we call it test harness, similar to what Mark's kind of referring to. We do about 150 tests every 10 minutes. And all the way down to getting even a token. So we know if AD's got a problem. We do some metrics on latency, for an example, especially at the API, right? At CD, API latency. I like tracing at the API level too. Gotta be careful turning that on, but you get some great stats. Now the problem is, I don't think there's definitely a one size fits all, because certain clusters might hit a little bit hotter than others, and you kind of expect that. That's where I know what we're looking at is more of a DevOps AI kind of thing. We need something that learns, right? Something that can find anomalies rather than hard metrics to say, this percent. Because sometimes it's reverse, right? If I'm getting 10%, somebody might look and go, that's great, my cluster is not busy, it's all servicing. Yeah, but why am I at 10% when I'm usually at 50? Yeah. So trying to catch that kind of metric is tough. That's where I like machine learning or, of course, some kind of AI. Yeah. I would love to get out a set of rules or something like that, because we had that pain. And even worse pain when you turn it on originally, and then your pager, old days, right? Your texts are going crazy and your phone just vibrates off the table. And what do you do at that point? You put it on mute.
Yeah, correct. That's the normal thing. When you have this thing on many times, people tend to avoid it. It's normally you silence, and then basically you have a bigger problem.
You do.
But yeah.
You do. I
Hey,
joke
sorry
with my
everybody, I
people,
need to
yeah.
drop, but
Thanks, Mark.
have a great weekend, everyone, and
Thanks for
talk to you guys
joining,
next week.
Mark. Yeah, let's close with questions if Scott has a little bit of time, but yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm looking at
Thank
that
you.
one message. If we could we would you mind posting
Mark,
that in the GitHub, in the PRs? I'm sorry, in the issues forum. We'll take a look at it and make sure we get that corrected. And I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't had any erratas so far. It happens, right? There's a lot of stuff to write. Sometimes the publisher has actually corrected some of our namespaces or something, and it's wrong. We try to find those before it gets published. So this is the question that was just put in the chat.
Yeah.
So I'm part of that. Oh, sorry. On the metrics too, Francisco. One thing I always joke with my logging team is Kubernetes cannot be accused of not giving you enough metrics for logging. I mean, it just, my God, what are you going to get terabytes if you turn everything on and enable tracing maybe at the API level? And you got to get through those. Which ones you care about is. So I was actually part of the CNCF Financial Services Working Group. I don't even know if they still exist, but it was a challenging working group, right? Because a lot of us can't say what we're doing publicly. We were trying to make generic standards, and part of it was going to be stuff like that. Was okay, you should be looking at these metrics, you should be looking at that. Unfortunately, we never got to that point, but it was a great discussion, and we all had the same kind of idea. Was this is a challenge? There's some nice good ones right at the top, but yeah, etcd latency, DNS latency, right? I mean, some of those problems, you get a developer as an issue, I'm like, oh, it's a DNS problem. And that's tough to find sometimes, right? Just knowing there's a high latency on it.
Yeah, and I don't know you, but sometimes you need to collect 1 year of metrics in order to get a kind of trend.
That's kind of where the iterative process comes in, yeah.
Yeah, because what you pointed out before is like why my cluster is working at 10%, but it can work at 50%. It's maybe because it's not a part of the season that is good. The demand is not so high. That maybe so you set up the alerts for possible 60% of capacity or 70% of capacity, and then you need to increase because your workload could be handled at 80% capacity of the cluster. So I don't know, it's a little bit tricky. That's why I asked the question. Is I know that it's very broad, but it's just to share some experience about that, because it's something that I have to do next week to have some things in my mind.
No, it's a great cover sheet. I mean, I'm not sure what I could even offer, but if you got something to take a look at when you do it, happy to look. I mean, whatever you can, right? I know sometimes you can't send things, depending on company and sensitivity. I mean, this is logging though, right? And metrics, nothing should be sensitive.
Yeah, that's been a long discussion as well in the community, right? Like, what if your logs have sensitive information? What happens?
Yeah.
But your metrics shouldn't have them. So yeah, it should.
Yeah, we've had that conversation. I'm a big fan of democratizing metrics.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, hey, if you can see somebody else's namespace metrics internally, right? We're not going to publish them on the internet, but it's still good to see. And cluster level, I like to. Because I want my developers to see that, so if they think their app is slow, they can't blame the node, right? Because they can't look and go, oh, it's only a 5%. Opposite's true though too. They might see 70 and think that's why they're slow. I'm like, no, that's normal. You gotta look at other things like queue length, right? CPU wait states. There's a lot of other metrics you can take a look at.
Yeah.
There's one thing maybe for 1 minute. Tony's wondering what you think about hotel.
That is absolutely correct. It is the hot thing everybody talks about. And even Splunk, if anybody uses Splunk, they've gone to the OTel collector for Splunk. They got rid of their old Fluentd, I think is what it was based on. It made it pretty powerful for certain things that I know we do. I actually have some internal projects around it as well, because they've got some great stuff in the OTel operator, right, for APM. So you make a Java container and you want to have metrics logging everything by an annotation and making an instrumentation CR. I can send that namespace data to one place, and that replaces having something like, say, app-d. Or you want just tracing ability with a normal app, and you don't have a service mesh running, because Kiali will do that for you. Well, Jaeger, right? And that's what we would use on the back end. So absolutely, you're right. Everywhere you go now, everybody says we have OTel compatible something.
Yeah.
And I would agree that is it's popular. It works great. I think when you see a vendor like Splunk do it, it's pretty telling for them to say, okay, yeah, you know what, we like this idea.
Brilliant.
Yeah, like the concept about correlating logs with a telemetry instrumentation, but I can't see it will replace it anytime soon, as the logging systems are very optimized and good on what they are doing.
Yeah, it's going pretty quick, to be honest, right? But you're right. There's a lot out that you have to replace on it. I really do like it, though. Like I said, the OTel collector and the OTel operator together. So the collector will grab like the kubelet stats, and the operator can do stuff more at the pod level, even enough to know to inject kind of a sidecar that knows how to grab the Java information or the Python information. Unfortunately, the Go collector it has is, I don't know who's going to be watching this at some point, but horribly written. It requires a privileged container to scrape. That privileged container runs in the namespace for the developer, which means he or she could jump into the container like an exec. And then what? It's trivial to root the operating system of the host. So we don't plan on using that one at this point, which is bad, right? It'd be great to have her go. But like a lot of places, we're a big Java shop, right? Some Spring and that. Python's popular. Actually, I think we use every language. Still RPG, I'm sure. We're a bank, right? We're going to use that old stuff.
Okay. So,
thanks, Eddie. It's great to see. Everybody has shown
I'll
up.
slowly have to close this session. Francisco, maybe you want to reach out to Scott on LinkedIn.
I'd be interested in it, Francisco. I mean, any questions that come up, I by all means, I can give you my other email address too.
Thank you, Scott. That's very kind of you. Okay, guys, this is probably we have some more to go before we close 2024. So thank you for taking the time on a Friday evening and afternoon to join us.
Always.
It was an amazing discussion again. And thank you, Scott. Mark left, but thanks to him as well for, again, hosting and helping me host this session. So
thank you for hosting it. So we appreciate it.
Have a great weekend, everybody, and see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.